They thought they were so clever, using my deployment money to build their dream home together. But when the lawyer read that title deed aloud, the room went silent. I can still see the look on Marcus's face when he realized what he had done. The color drained from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. Sarah, his girlfriend, the woman he chose over 12 years of marriage. She just sat there with her mouth hanging open. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning of this story, back to when I thought I had lost everything. Before I share what really happened that day, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments, or let me know where you are tuning in from. I love hearing how my story reaches people across the world. Your support means everything to me. The Phoenix airport was bustling with travelers when I stepped off that plane in March. 15 months overseas, serving my country, missing birthdays and anniversaries, and quiet Sunday mornings. My duffel bag felt heavier than usual as I walked through the terminal, not because of what was inside, but because of what I was walking toward. The text messages had been getting stranger over the past few months. Marcus seemed distant during our video calls. He always had an excuse for why he could not talk long. Work was busy, he said. The house needed repairs, he said. He was tired, he said. I should have known something was wrong when he stopped asking me to come home early. In the beginning of my deployment, he begged me to find a way to cut it short. He missed me, he said. The bed was too cold, he said. But somewhere around month 8, those pleas just stopped. He seemed almost relieved when I told him my deployment was extended another 3 months. Looking back now, I realize he needed that time to plan his exit strategy. The taxi ride to our house felt like driving through a movie set. Everything looked the same but felt completely different. The palm trees lining our street swayed in the warm Arizona breeze exactly like they had when I left. The mountains in the distance stood purple and majestic against the afternoon sky. But something was off. Something I could not quite name yet. Our driveway was empty when I arrived. Marcus was supposed to be home from work by now. I paid the driver and stood there for a moment, looking at the house we had bought together 7 years ago. The little ranch-style home with the red tile roof and the desert landscaping that I had spent weekends perfecting before I deployed. It looked smaller somehow, more tired. The paint on the front door was peeling, and the flower beds I had planted were overgrown with weeds. I used my key to unlock the front door, expecting to hear Marcus call out my name. Expecting to see him rush around the corner with that smile I fell in love with 15 years ago. Instead, I walked into silence. The house felt empty, not just of people, but of life itself. The furniture was still there, but it looked arranged differently. Pictures were missing from the walls. The wedding photo that used to sit on the mantel was gone. I called his name as I walked through the house, my voice echoing in the quiet rooms. No answer. I checked the bedroom we shared. His side of the closet was nearly empty. Just a few old shirts and some clothes he never wore anymore. The bathroom counter that used to hold his shaving cream and cologne was bare except for a thin layer of dust. My phone buzzed with a text message. Finally, I thought. Marcus explaining where he was, apologizing for not being here when I got home. But the message was not from Marcus. It was from my neighbor, Mrs. Chun. She was 83 years old and had lived next door since before we moved in. The message was short, but it hit me like a punch to the stomach. Welcome home, honey. I am so sorry about everything. If you need anything, just knock. I stared at that message for a long time, trying to understand what she was sorry about. What had happened while I was gone? What did she know that I did not? I walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was almost empty except for a few condiments and a carton of milk that had expired 2 weeks ago. No fresh food. No leftovers. No signs that anyone had been living here recently. The silence in the house was deafening. I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to think. Where was Marcus? Why had he not returned my calls from yesterday? Why did Mrs. Chin say she was sorry? I pulled out my phone and called his number again. It went straight to voicemail. I hung up and tried texting him. I am home. Where are you? 20 minutes passed. No response. I decided to call his work. Maybe he was pulling a double shift. Maybe he had forgotten what day I was coming home. His supervisor, Dave, answered on the third ring. "Oh hey," Dave said when I told him who I was. "You are back. How was your deployment?" I told him it was fine and asked to speak to Marcus. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A pause that lasted just a little too long. "Marcus is not here," Dave said finally. "He has not been here for about 6 weeks now. He quit. Said he was moving out of state for a new opportunity." "I thought you knew." The phone felt heavy in my hand. Marcus quit his job 6 weeks ago and never told me? He was moving out of state? Without me. "I am sorry," Dave continued. "I figured you two had discussed it." He seemed pretty excited about his new life. His new life. Those words echoed in my head as I hung up the phone. Marcus was starting a new life, and apparently, I was not part of it. I sat there in our empty kitchen, staring at the wall where we used to hang our grocery lists and appointment reminders. The wall was blank now. Clean. Like we had never existed. I walked to the bedroom and opened the drawer where we kept important documents. Birth certificates, passports, insurance papers. I was looking for something, anything, that might explain what was happening. The drawer was mostly empty, but I found a bank statement from our joint account that had been delivered the week before I got home. I opened it with shaking hands. The account that should have had over $60,000 from my deployment pay was almost empty. $347.12. That was all that remained of 15 months of combat pay, hazard pay, and the overtime I had worked to save for our future. The money I had been sending home every month, telling Marcus to put it in our savings account for the down payment on the bigger house we had talked about buying when I got back. I stared at that bank statement until the numbers blurred. $60,000. Gone. Money I had earned sleeping in a tent, eating meals from packages, missing Christmas and Valentine's Day and our wedding anniversary. Money I had earned while dodging mortar fire and wondering if I would ever see home again. Money that was supposed to be our future. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. Finally. "Hey," his text said. "I know you are probably confused. Can we meet tomorrow to talk? There are some things I need to explain." Some things he needed to explain? Like where he was. Like where our money was. Like why our house felt like a museum of our old life. I typed back quickly. "Where are you? Where is our money? What is going on?" I hit send and waited. The 3 dots appeared, showing he was typing. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. After 5 minutes, his response came through. "It is complicated. I will explain everything tomorrow. Meet me at the Denny's on Bell Road at noon." Denny's. He wanted to have the most important conversation of our marriage at a Denny's. The same place we used to go for late-night coffee when we were dating. The same place where he had told me he loved me for the first time. Now he was going to explain why he had disappeared with our life savings at the same restaurant where we used to share pancakes and dreams. I did not sleep that night. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what had happened. The empty closet. The missing pictures. The drained bank account. The new life Dave had mentioned. It all pointed to one conclusion, but I was not ready to accept it yet. I kept hoping there was another explanation. Maybe Marcus had invested the money in something. Maybe he had bought us a surprise. Maybe there was a reason I could live with. The next morning, I got dressed carefully. I chose the blue dress Marcus had always said was his favorite. I did my hair the way he liked it. I put on the perfume he had bought me for our last anniversary. I guess I was still hoping that whatever he had to tell me could be fixed. That we could go back to being the couple who had said goodbye at this same airport 15 months ago. I arrived at Denny's 10 minutes early and chose a booth near the window. The same booth where we had sat on our first date. The hostess, a young woman with bright pink hair, smiled at me and asked if I was waiting for someone. I nodded and ordered coffee. Black coffee. I needed to be alert for whatever was coming. Marcus walked in at exactly noon. He looked different. Tanner, like he had been spending time outdoors. His hair was longer than he usually wore it. He was wearing a shirt I had never seen before. A nice shirt. The kind of shirt you buy when you want to impress someone. He spotted me right away and walked over with a nervous smile. "You look good," he said as he slid into the booth across from me. "Deployment agreed with you." I did not respond. I was not there for small talk. I was there for answers. He ordered coffee from the waitress and then looked at me with those brown eyes that had once made me feel like the most important person in the world. Now they just looked guilty. I know you have questions, he began, and I know you are probably angry. But I need you to understand that I never meant for it to happen this way. Never meant for what to happen this way. I still did not know what it was. I met someone, he continued. Her name is Sarah. She works at the bank where I was depositing your checks. The words hit me like a physical blow. He met someone. While I was deployed. While I was serving our country. While I was missing him every single day. It just happened, he said, like that was supposed to make it better. We started talking when I came in to make deposits. Then we started having coffee. Then, he trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. The money, I said quietly. Where is our money, Marcus? He looked down at his hands. Hands that used to hold mine. Hands that had slipped a wedding ring on my finger 12 years ago. I used it for a down payment, he said. Sarah and I bought a house together. In Scottsdale. It is beautiful. You would actually like it. I would like it. He had bought a house with another woman using my deployment money, and he thought I would like it. I felt something break inside me. Not just my heart, but something deeper. Some fun. The mental trust in the world that I had carried with me through every dangerous mission, every long night overseas, every moment when I had questioned whether the sacrifice was worth it. I want a divorce, I said. The words came out steadier than I felt. Marcus nodded like he had been expecting it. I figured, he said. I already talked to a lawyer. We can keep this simple. Split everything 50-50. Sarah found a really good attorney who specializes in military divorces. Sarah found an attorney. His girlfriend, who had helped him spend my money, had also helped him find a lawyer to make sure he got half of whatever was left. The woman who had been living in a house bought with my sacrifice was now making sure she and Marcus were protected in the divorce. I am not signing anything until I talk to my own lawyer, I said. That is fine, Marcus said. But there is not much to split. The house is in both our names, Sarah and mine. The money is gone. Your car is paid off, so you can keep that. I will take the truck. We each keep our own retirement accounts. It should be pretty straightforward. Both their names. He had put the house in both their names. My deployment money had bought them a home together while I was sleeping in a tent. I stood up from the booth. I could not sit there anymore, listening to him talk about his new life like it was a normal conversation, like he had not just destroyed everything we had built together. I will have my lawyer contact you, I said. I threw a $5 bill on the table for my coffee and walked out. I did not look back. I did not want to see his face anymore. I did not want to hear his voice explaining how he had fallen in love with someone else while I was gone. I just wanted to get away from that restaurant and the smell of bacon and the sound of his excuses. I drove home in a daze. My home. Except it was not really my home anymore. It was just a house where I used to live with someone who had become a stranger. I sat in the driveway for a long time, trying to figure out what to do next. I had no money. No husband. No life to come back to. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed for, was gone. Mrs. Chin was working in her garden when I finally got out of the car. She looked up and waved, then walked over to the fence that separated our properties. How are you holding up, dear? She asked. Her voice was gentle, full of the kind of sympathy that comes from knowing someone has been hurt badly. I am managing, I said, though I was not sure that was true. Mrs. Chin, how long have you known? About Marcus and... I could not say her name. About what was happening? She looked uncomfortable, like she was trying to decide how much to tell me. About 3 months, she said finally. She started coming around while you were gone. At first, I thought maybe she was a friend or a coworker. But then she started staying overnight. Then she started getting mail here. Getting mail at my house. Sarah had been living in my house, sleeping in my bed, using my address while I was deployed. I wanted to tell you, Mrs. Chin continued, but I did not know how. I did not have your contact information overseas. And I kept hoping it would end before you got back. She paused and looked at me with kind eyes. I am so sorry, honey. You deserved better than this. I thanked her and went inside. The house felt even emptier now that I knew the truth. I could picture them here together, cooking dinner in my kitchen, watching movies on my couch, planning their future with my money. I walked to the bedroom and opened the window. I needed fresh air. I needed to breathe. That night, I called my sister Jennifer in California. She had been my rock through so many difficult times. When our parents died, when I was struggling through basic training, when I was nervous about my first deployment. I wondered when you would call, she said when she heard my voice. I have been worried about you. I told her everything. About coming home to an empty house. About the missing money. About Marcus and Sarah and the house in Scottsdale. About the divorce lawyer and the 50-50 split of nothing. Jennifer listened without interrupting, letting me get it all out. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. What are you going to do? She asked finally. I do not know, I said. I guess I need to find a lawyer. Figure out if there is anything I can do to get some of my money back. Start over somehow. Do you want me to fly out there? She asked. You do not have to go through this alone. I almost said yes. I almost asked her to come and help me pack up the pieces of my life. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the same stubborn independence that had gotten me through 15 months overseas. I think I need to handle this myself, I said. But thank you for listening. I love you. I love you too, she said. And remember, you are stronger than you know. You survived a deployment. You can survive this too. After I hung up, I sat in the dark living room and thought about her words. I was stronger than I knew. I had survived things that would break other people. I had faced down enemies and lived through situations that tested every limit I had. Surely I could survive my husband's betrayal. The next morning, I started making calls. I found a lawyer who specialized in military divorces. Her name was Amanda Rodriguez, and she had good reviews online. Her office was in downtown Phoenix, in a tall building with reflective windows that gleamed in the desert sun. I made an appointment for the following week. I also called my bank and asked for copies of all the statements for the past year. I wanted to see exactly where my money had gone. When the statements arrived, I spread them out on the kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle. Month by month, I could see the deposits from my deployment pay. Then I could see the withdrawals. Large withdrawals. Always in round numbers. 5,000 here. 8,000 there. 12,000 in 1 week in December. The pattern was clear. Marcus had been systematically draining our account to fund his new life with Sarah. Every month, he had taken more. By the end, he was taking almost everything I sent home. The money I had earned living in a desert, missing holidays, putting my life on the line for my country. It was all gone, spent on another woman's dream home. I made a list of questions for the lawyer. Could I get any of the money back? Was there anything legally wrong with what Marcus had done? Did I have any claim to the house he had bought with my deployment pay? Could I force him to sell it? The questions filled 2 pages of a legal pad. The day of my appointment with Amanda Rodriguez, I dressed in my best suit. The same suit I had worn to military ceremonies and award presentations. I wanted to look professional, competent, like someone who deserved to be taken seriously. The lawyer's office was on the 15th floor, with a view of the city that stretched all the way to the mountains. Amanda was younger than I had expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had kind eyes but a firm handshake. The kind of person who would fight for you but would also tell you the truth even when it hurt. Tell me what happened, she said after we sat down in her office. I went through the whole story again. The deployment, the empty house, the missing money, the girlfriend, the new house in Scottsdale. Amanda took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking questions for clarification. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied her notes. This is not uncommon, she said finally. Military spouses left behind sometimes make poor choices. The question is whether we can prove financial misconduct and what remedies are available. She explained that Arizona was a community property state, which meant that everything earned during the marriage belonged to both spouses equally. But there were exceptions for money spent on affairs or wasted on non-marital purposes. The house is the key, Amanda said. If we can show that your deployment money was used to purchase property for him and another woman, we might be able to make a claim against it. But first, I need to see the title documents and the purchase records." She gave me a list of documents to obtain and said she would start working on the case immediately. I left her office feeling something I had not felt since I got home. Hope. Maybe there was a way to get some justice. Maybe Marcus and Sarah had not thought through all the legal implications of their actions. Maybe there was still a chance to recover some of what I had lost. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. I obtained copies of the title documents for the house in Scottsdale. I got bank records showing exactly how much of my deployment money had been used for the down payment. I even drove by the house one afternoon just to see what my sacrifice had bought them. It was beautiful. A modern 2-story home with a 3-car garage and a swimming pool. Desert landscaping that must have cost thousands of dollars. A view of the mountains that took my breath away. Standing there on the sidewalk, looking at the house my money had bought for another woman, I felt a mixture of rage and sadness that threatened to overwhelm me. But I also felt something else. A quiet determination. A resolve that had been forged in the desert overseas and tempered by months of hardship. I was not going to let them get away with this. I was not going to quietly accept the loss of everything I had worked for. I was going to fight, and I was going to win. Amanda called me 2 weeks later with news. She had reviewed all the documents and was ready to file a motion with the court. "I think we have a strong case," she said. "But there is something else you need to know. Something that might change everything." Her voice had a quality I had not heard before. Excitement mixed with satisfaction. "What is it?" I asked. "Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? I want to show you something." Something about that house title that neither Marcus nor Sarah apparently bothered to check. I could hear the smile in her voice. "I think you are going to be very interested in what I found." I hung up the phone and felt a flutter of anticipation in my chest. Something about the house title. Something Marcus and Sarah had missed. Something that might change everything. I looked around the empty house where I had been living like a ghost for the past month, and for the first time since I got home, I felt like maybe the story was not over yet. Maybe there was still a chapter to be written where I was not the victim but the victor. Where the truth came out and justice was served. Where the quiet strength I had developed overseas would finally pay off. I did not know what Amanda had found, but I knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow morning, I would be in her office, ready to hear whatever she had discovered. Ready to learn if there was still a way to turn this story around. The next morning, I arrived at Amanda's office 15 minutes early. I had barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities about what she had discovered. The receptionist offered me coffee, but my hands were already shaking with nervous energy. I sat in the waiting area, watching the clock and trying to prepare myself for whatever news was coming. Amanda appeared at exactly 9 o'clock, wearing a sharp gray suit and carrying a thick folder. "Come on back," she said, but there was something in her voice that made my pulse quicken. Not bad news, but something significant. Something that was about to change everything I thought I knew about my situation. Her office looked different somehow. More official. The documents spread across her desk were organized in neat piles, each marked with colorful tabs. Legal books were opened to specific pages, with yellow sticky notes marking important passages. This was not just a consultation anymore. This was preparation for war. "Before I show you what I found," Amanda said as we sat down, "I need you to understand something about military law and property rights. When you were deployed, certain legal protections were automatically in place to protect your interests. Protections that most people, including civilian lawyers, do not fully understand." She opened the folder and pulled out a thick document. "This is the Service Members Civil Relief Act, also known as SCRA. It provides specific protections for active duty military personnel in legal and financial matters. One of those protections involves real estate transactions conducted while you were deployed." I leaned forward, trying to follow what she was telling me. "What kind of protections?" I asked. Amanda smiled, and for the first time since I had met her, it was not a professional smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to deliver very good news. "Under federal law," she said, Any major financial transaction conducted by a spouse while the service member is deployed can be challenged if it involves marital assets. But more importantly, there are specific regulations about how property titles must be handled when deployment funds are used for purchase. She pulled out another document, this one with official letterhead from the county recorder's office. This is the title document for the house in Scottsdale, the house that Marcus and Sarah thought they owned together. Look at the legal description at the bottom of the page. I took the document and read where she was pointing. The legal language was dense and confusing, full of whereas clauses and official terminology. But then I saw it. In small print at the bottom of the page, almost like a footnote. Primary funding source identified as active duty deployment compensation, Service Member Protection Act applicable. What does that mean? I asked, though something in my chest was starting to flutter with hope. Amanda's smile grew wider. It means that when Marcus used your deployment money as the down payment, the bank was legally required to notify the title company that the funds came from an active duty service member. And when that happens, federal law requires specific protections to be put in place. She turned to another page in the folder. Here is the bank's internal memo from the day of the down payment. They clearly identified the funds as military deployment compensation. They were legally obligated to flag this transaction and ensure proper documentation. My hands were trembling as I looked at the memo. There, in black and white, was confirmation that the bank knew exactly where the money had come from. They knew I was deployed. They knew it was my money. And they had followed federal protocol to protect my interests. But the house is in both their names, I said. Marcus and Sarah. I saw it on the title. Amanda nodded and pulled out yet another document. That is where it gets interesting. Look at this more closely. This is not just a standard joint title. This is what is called a conditional title with federal lien notation. She pointed to a section I had missed before. Buried in the legal language was a phrase that made my heart race. Subject to Service Member Civil Relief Act provisions and potential federal claim priority. Below that, in even smaller print, was my name and service number. What this means, Amanda explained, is that while Marcus could put Sarah's name on the title as a co-owner, the federal government placed an automatic protective lien on the property because of how it was purchased. Essentially, you have a superior claim to the property that supersedes their ownership rights. I stared at the document, trying to process what she was telling me. So I own the house? Amanda held up a hand. Not exactly. But you have what is called a paramount federal interest in the property, which means that in any legal proceeding, your claim takes priority over theirs. She leaned back in her chair and looked at me with satisfaction. Marcus and Sarah bought a house together, but they did not actually get clear title to it. The federal government, acting on your behalf as a deployed service member, placed a cloud on that title that can only be resolved by compensating you for the misuse of your deployment funds. The room felt like it was spinning. For weeks, I had been living with the belief that I had lost everything, that Marcus and Sarah had outsmarted me and stolen my future. But it turned out that the very laws designed to protect people like me had been working behind the scenes all along. How did they not know about this? I asked. Amanda shrugged. Because they used a discount real estate attorney who specializes in quick closings, not military law. And because Sarah's so-called specialist in military divorces apparently did not specialize enough to catch this. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages. I have been in contact with the title company this morning. They confirmed that they properly filed all the federal notifications, but they never explained to the buyers what those notifications meant. As far as they were concerned, they followed the law. What Marcus and Sarah did with that information was not their problem. I thought back to that day at Denny's when Marcus had told me about the house. How confident he had seemed. How he had talked about splitting everything 50-50 like it was a done deal. He had no idea that the federal government had been protecting my interests from the moment he signed that purchase agreement. What happens now? I asked. Amanda gathered the documents and slipped them back into the folder. Now we file a federal claim against the property. We demand full compensation for the misappropriated deployment funds, plus interest and legal fees. and we give Marcus and Sarah a choice. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. They can either pay you back the full amount of your deployment money that was used for the down payment, with interest, or they can deed the house over to you and find somewhere else to live. The magnitude of what she was saying hit me like a physical force. After weeks of feeling powerless and betrayed, I suddenly had options. Real options. Legal options backed by federal law. How long will this take? I asked. That depends on how quickly they want to resolve it, Amanda said. Once we file the federal claim, they will have 30 days to respond. If they fight it, we go to federal court, where their chances of winning are essentially zero. The law is very clear on this. I left Amanda's office that day feeling like a different person than the one who had walked in. The broken, betrayed wife was still there, but she was joined by someone stronger. Someone who had legal backing and federal protection. Someone who was about to turn the tables on the people who had thought they could steal her future. That afternoon, I did something I had not done since coming home. I drove to the house in Scottsdale where Marcus and Sarah were living. But this time, I did not park on the street and stare longingly at what I had lost. This time, I parked in the driveway and walked up to the front door like I owned the place. Which, it turned out, I essentially did. I did not knock. I was not there to confront them or cause a scene. I was there to see the house that federal law had been protecting for me all along. I walked around the property, taking pictures with my phone. Pictures that Amanda had requested for our legal filing. Evidence of what my deployment money had purchased. The backyard was even more beautiful than I had imagined. The swimming pool sparkled in the afternoon sun, surrounded by expensive patio furniture and professionally designed landscaping. There was a fire pit area and an outdoor kitchen that must have cost more than most people made in a year. All of it paid for with money I had earned sleeping in a tent and eating military rations. As I stood there taking pictures, I thought about the nights overseas when I had dreamed about coming home. I had pictured quiet evenings with Marcus, talking about our plans for the future. I had imagined us looking at houses together, choosing something we both loved, making it into a home filled with our shared memories. I never imagined that my deployment money would be used to build someone else's dream home while I was gone. But I also never imagined that federal law would be protecting my interests even when I did not know I needed protection. Sometimes the very system you serve finds ways to serve you back. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was Marcus. Sarah saw someone taking pictures of our house. Was that you? Our house. Even now, even after everything, he still called it their house. I typed back quickly. My lawyer needed photos for our filing. You might want to call your attorney. 3 dots appeared immediately, showing he was typing a response. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. Finally, his message came through. What filing? We already discussed the divorce terms. I almost laughed. He still had no idea what was coming. Check with your lawyer, I replied. Things just got more complicated. I did not wait for his response. I got back in my car and drove home, feeling lighter than I had felt in weeks. For the first time since coming back from deployment, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. That evening, I called Jennifer to tell her what Amanda had discovered. Are you serious? She said when I finished explaining about the federal protections. They basically bought a house they do not actually own? I could hear the amazement in her voice. That is what it sounds like, I said. The federal government has been protecting my interests this whole time, and nobody told Marcus and Sarah. They thought they were so clever, but they walked right into a legal trap. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, processing what I had told her. So what are you going to do? She asked. Are you going to take the house or make them pay you back? I had been thinking about that all afternoon. The house was beautiful, but it was not really mine. It was a monument to their betrayal, filled with memories of their relationship. I did not want to live there. I think I want the money, I said. I want them to have to sell their dream home and pay me back every penny of my deployment funds, plus interest, plus legal fees. I want them to understand exactly what it costs to steal from someone who is serving their country. Jennifer was quiet again, then she said something that surprised me. You know what I think? I think this is bigger than just getting your money back. I think this is about showing other military families that they have protections they might not know about. How many other deployed soldiers have had their spouses drain their accounts while they were gone? She was right. This was not just about my situation anymore. This was about sending a message that military families had legal protections, and those protections had teeth. This was about making sure that anyone who thought they could take advantage of a deployed service member knew there would be consequences. Over the next few days, Amanda filed our federal claim. She also sent a formal notice to Marcus and Sarah's attorney, explaining their legal situation and our demands. The response came faster than I had expected. Marcus called me directly, his voice tight with panic. "We need to talk," he said. "In person. This is crazy. You cannot just take our house." I almost corrected him about whose house it really was, but I decided to let Amanda's legal filing speak for itself. "Talk to your lawyer," I said. "If you want to discuss terms, it goes through attorneys." "Please," he said, and there was something in his voice I had never heard before. Desperation. "Just meet me for coffee. Let me explain what this would do to us. Sarah is pregnant. We cannot afford to lose this house." Sarah was pregnant. They were building a family in the home my sacrifice had purchased. The irony was almost too much to bear. "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I was not cruel enough to wish unhappiness on an unborn child. But that does not change what you did with my money. Work it out with your lawyer. I hung up before he could say anything else. 3 days later, Amanda called with an update. "They want to negotiate," she said. Their attorney finally looked into the federal statutes and realized they do not have a legal leg to stand on. They are asking for a payment plan instead of a lump sum. A payment plan. They wanted to pay me back my own money over time, with interest, while continuing to live in the house my deployment had bought them. "What do you think?" I asked. Amanda was quiet for a moment. "Legally, we could demand immediate payment and force a sale of the house. But practically, a payment plan might work better for everyone." We scheduled a meeting for the following week. A mediation session where both sides would try to reach an agreement without going to federal court. Amanda explained that the mediator would be a retired federal judge who specialized in military law. Someone who would understand exactly what protections I had and what remedies were available. The night before the mediation, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The deployment that had taken me away from home for 15 months. The sacrifices I had made for my country and my marriage. The betrayal I had come home to. And now, the unexpected legal protection that was about to give me back some measure of justice. I thought about Marcus and Sarah, probably lying awake in their beautiful bedroom, wondering if they were about to lose everything. I should have felt satisfied, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of the whole situation. Tired of fighting. Tired of having my life defined by what someone else had done to me. But I also felt something else. A quiet strength that had been building since I learned about the federal protections. The same strength that had gotten me through basic training and deployment and every challenge the military had thrown at me. The strength that comes from knowing you are in the right and the law is on your side. Tomorrow, I would walk into that mediation room not as a victim, but as someone with options. Someone with federal law backing her up. Someone who had served her country and earned the protections that service provided. For the first time since coming home, I felt ready for whatever came next. The morning of the mediation, I dressed in my service dress uniform. Not because I had to, but because I wanted Marcus and Sarah to see exactly who they had stolen from. I wanted them to see the person who had earned that money through service and sacrifice while they were building their relationship with my deployment pay. Amanda met me outside the mediation center, a neutral location downtown. "You look ready," she said when she saw me in uniform. "Good. Let them see what honor looks like." We walked into the building together, both of us carrying folders full of evidence, both of us confident in the strength of our legal position. The mediation room was simple and professional, with a long conference table and chairs for all parties. Marcus and Sarah were already there with their attorney, a middle-aged man who looked uncomfortable and kept shuffling through papers. They both looked up when we entered, and I saw Sarah's eyes widen when she saw my uniform. The mediator, Judge Harrison, was a distinguished woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind but serious eyes. She had clearly reviewed all the documents in advance because she got straight to the point. We are here because federal law provides specific protections for military service members, and those protections appear to have been triggered in this case. She looked directly at Marcus and Sarah. Before we begin negotiating terms, I want to make sure you both understand your legal situation. The house you believe you own together is subject to a federal lien that gives Ms. Rodriguez superior rights to the property. This is not a negotiable point. This is federal law. Sarah spoke for the first time since I had entered the room. But we made the mortgage payments. We have been living there for months. We improved the property. That has to count for something. Judge Harrison nodded sympathetically, but her expression remained firm. You made improvements to property that was purchased with misappropriated military deployment funds, she said. Under federal law, those improvements benefit the service member, not the parties who made them without proper authorization. The color drained from Sarah's face as the full implications became clear. Their attorney leaned forward and tried to salvage the situation. Your Honor, my clients were not aware of the federal implications when they made the purchase. They relied on professional advice and followed all standard procedures. Judge Harrison looked at him with something that might have been pity. Ignorance of federal law is not a defense, she said, especially when that law exists specifically to protect military families from exactly this type of financial exploitation. She turned to Amanda and me. What terms are you seeking? Amanda opened her folder and laid out our demands. Full repayment of all deployment funds used for the down payment. Interest calculated from the date of each withdrawal. All legal fees. And a timeline for payment that would not allow them to continue benefiting from my money while paying me back slowly. The room was quiet as everyone absorbed what we were asking for. It was not just the money. It was acknowledgement that what they had done was wrong. It was consequences for actions that had devastated my life. It was justice backed by federal law. Judge Harrison looked at Marcus and Sarah's attorney. What is your response? He whispered with his clients for several minutes before answering. We would like to request a 30-minute recess to discuss options with our clients. The judge nodded, and we all stepped out of the room. Amanda and I waited in the hallway while Marcus, Sarah, and their lawyer huddled together near the elevators. I could see the stress on their faces, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. They had thought they were so clever, using my deployment money to build their perfect life. Now they were learning that the federal government had been watching all along. When we returned to the mediation room, the atmosphere had completely changed. Marcus sat with his shoulders slumped, staring at his hands. Sarah was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Their attorney looked like he had aged 10 years in 30 minutes. Judge Harrison took her seat and looked expectantly at their side of the table. We have discussed the situation with our clients, their attorney began, his voice noticeably less confident than before. They understand the severity of their legal position and are prepared to make an offer. He pulled out a piece of paper and slid it across the table to Amanda. Amanda reviewed the offer and showed it to me. They were proposing to pay back the deployment funds over 5 years with minimal interest while continuing to live in the house. They wanted to treat my stolen money like a loan they had taken out, paying me back slowly while enjoying the property my sacrifice had purchased. I looked at Marcus, really looked at him, for the first time since this whole process began. The man I had married 15 years ago was still there somewhere, but he was buried under layers of guilt and poor choices. He had made decisions that had destroyed our marriage and stolen my future, and now he wanted to pay me back on a payment plan like I was a credit card company. No, I said quietly. The word hung in the air between us. Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow. Could you elaborate on your position, Ms. Rodriguez? She asked. I stood up, my uniform crisp and my voice steady. This was my moment to speak for myself, not just as a victim, but as someone who had served her country and earned the right to demand justice. Your Honor, I spent 15 months deployed overseas, missing holidays and anniversaries and quiet moments at home. I lived in a tent, ate meals from packages, and put my life on the line every day while serving my country. Every dollar of that deployment pay was earned through sacrifice and service. I looked directly at Marcus and Sarah as I continued. While I was gone, my husband used that money to build a life with another woman. Not just any money, but compensation I earned for serving our country in a combat zone. Money that was supposed to secure our future together. My voice grew stronger as I spoke. They want to pay me back over 5 years while continuing to live in luxury in the house my service purchased. They want to treat my deployment compensation like a convenience loan while they raise their family in the home my sacrifice built. Judge Harrison nodded and made notes on her legal pad. What remedy do you believe is appropriate? She asked. Amanda had prepared me for this question, but the answer came from my heart, not from legal strategy. I want them to sell the house and pay me back immediately, in full, with interest and legal fees. Sarah gasped audibly. But we cannot sell the house. I am pregnant. We have nowhere else to go. We put everything we had into this place. I felt a flicker of sympathy for her situation, but it was quickly overwhelmed by the injustice of what they were asking. You put everything you had into it, plus everything I had, I replied. My deployment money was not yours to spend. My sacrifice was not yours to benefit from. And now you want me to subsidize your family home by accepting payments over 5 years while you live there. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice shaky. We never meant for it to happen like this. We thought the money was joint property. We thought we could work it out in the divorce. Judge Harrison looked at him with an expression that was both stern and educational. Mr. Rodriguez, deployment compensation has specific federal protections precisely because of situations like this. The law recognizes that military families make unique sacrifices and need special legal safeguards. Your wife's deployment pay was protected from the moment she earned it, regardless of what you thought about joint property. She turned to Sarah, and Ms. Chun, participating in the expenditure of protected military funds, even unknowingly, does not give you legal standing to claim hardship when those protections are enforced. Sarah's face crumpled, and she began crying softly into her tissue. Their attorney tried one more approach. Your Honor, if we force a sale of the property, my clients will lose significant money. They have made mortgage payments, property improvements, and lived there for months. They will be financially devastated. Judge Harrison's expression did not change. Mr. Williams, your clients chose to purchase property with funds they were not legally entitled to use. The financial consequences of that choice are not the responsibility of the service member they wronged. Federal law exists to protect military families, not to subsidize the mistakes of those who exploit them. Amanda leaned forward and addressed the room. Your Honor, my client has been more than patient. She discovered this betrayal when she returned from deployment and has pursued legal remedies rather than simply demanding immediate possession of the property, which federal law would allow. She pulled out the title document and placed it on the table where everyone could see it. The federal lien notation on this property makes it clear that Ms. Rodriguez has superior rights. We are not asking for anything beyond what the law already provides. We are simply asking for enforcement of existing federal protections. Judge Harrison picked up the title document and read the federal notation aloud. Subject to Service Member Civil Relief Act provisions and potential federal claim priority. She looked up at Marcus and Sarah. This language was placed on your title by federal law the moment deployment funds were used for purchase. You have been living in a house with clouded title for months. The room fell silent as the full implications became clear. They had not just bought a house with my money. They had bought a house they could never legally own free and clear because federal law had placed a claim on it from day one. Every mortgage payment they had made, every improvement they had added, had been building equity they could never fully possess. Sarah stopped crying and looked directly at me for the first time. What do you want from us? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I mean, really want. Do you want to destroy us? Do you want to take our home and leave us with nothing? Her question caught me off guard, not because it was unreasonable, but because it forced me to examine my own motivations. Did I want to destroy them? 6 weeks ago, when I first learned about their betrayal, maybe I did. I was angry and hurt and wanted them to suffer the way I had suffered. But sitting in that mediation room, wearing my uniform and surrounded by legal documents that proved my rights, I realized that my anger had transformed into something else, something more powerful than revenge. I want justice, I said finally. I want the money I earned through service and sacrifice. I want recognition that what you did was wrong and had consequences. But I do not want to destroy you. I want you to understand the cost of your choices. Judge Harrison nodded approvingly. Ms. Rodriguez, what specific terms would you consider fair? I looked at Amanda, who nodded encouragingly. This was my decision to make, my chance to determine how this story would end. I want the full amount of my deployment funds that were used for the down payment, plus interest calculated at federal rates, I said. I want all my legal fees paid. And I want it within 90 days, which means they will need to sell the house or find another way to raise the money. I paused and looked at Sarah, whose hand was resting protectively on her still flat stomach. I am not asking for mortgage payments they made or improvements they added. I am not trying to profit from this situation. I just want back what was mine to begin with. Marcus leaned forward, hope flickering in his eyes. So we could keep the house if we can find another way to pay you back? We could refinance or take out a loan or... Amanda cut him off with a sharp look. Mr. Rodriguez, any refinancing or additional loans would require clear title, which you do not have and cannot obtain while the federal lien exists. Judge Harrison explained the practical reality of their situation. The federal claim makes the property unmarketable except to satisfy that claim. No lender will refinance a property with a federal lien. No buyer will purchase it without clear title. Your only option is to sell the property and use the proceeds to satisfy the federal claim. The weight of their predicament settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Marcus and Sarah had built their dream life on a foundation that was legally unsound from the beginning. Every month they had lived there, every payment they had made, had been borrowed time that was now coming due. Their attorney requested another recess, but Judge Harrison shook her head. We need to resolve this today. The federal claim has been properly filed, and the law is clear. The only question is whether this will be settled through mediation or federal court. She looked directly at Marcus and Sarah. I strongly advise you to accept Ms. Rodriguez's terms. If this goes to federal court, you will face additional penalties, fees, and potentially criminal charges for misappropriation of military funds. The court will not be as generous as Ms. Rodriguez has been today. Criminal charges. I had not known that was a possibility, but I could see from Amanda's expression that Judge Harrison was not exaggerating. What Marcus had done was not just a civil matter. It was potentially a federal crime to misappropriate deployment funds, especially for personal benefit while the service member was overseas. Sarah began crying again, but this time it was the sound of someone whose world was collapsing. We cannot afford to pay that much money in 90 days, she sobbed. We do not have it. Everything we have is tied up in the house. Marcus put his arm around her, but he looked defeated. Then you sell the house, Judge Harrison said matter-of-factly. Real estate moves quickly in this market. 90 days is sufficient time to list, market, and close on a property, especially one in Scottsdale. She looked at their attorney. What is your client's decision? The lawyer whispered urgently with Marcus and Sarah for several minutes. I could see the desperation in their faces, the realization that they had no good options left. Finally, Marcus straightened up and looked across the table at me. We accept your terms, he said quietly. We will sell the house and pay you back within 90 days. His voice was hollow, defeated. The confident man who had explained his new life to me at Denny's was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the consequences of his choices. Judge Harrison made official notes of the agreement and explained the next steps. The property will be listed for sale immediately. All proceeds above the mortgage balance will go to Ms. Rodriguez until her claim is satisfied. If the sale proceeds are insufficient, Mr. Rodriguez and Ms. Chun will be personally liable for the remainder. Amanda handed them a document outlining the specific terms of our agreement. This settlement is binding and enforceable in federal court, she explained. Any deviation from these terms will result in immediate legal action and potential criminal referral. As we gathered our papers and prepared to leave, Sarah approached me hesitantly. "I know you have no reason to believe me," she said, "but I really did not know the money came from your deployment. Marcus told me it was savings from his job." I looked at her for a long moment, trying to decide if I believed her. "Maybe you did not know at first," I said finally, "but you knew I was deployed. You knew I was married to Marcus, and you chose to build a life with him using money that came from somewhere while his wife was serving overseas." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You are right," she whispered. "I knew it was wrong, even if I did not know it was illegal. I am sorry. I know that does not fix anything, but I am truly sorry." There was something in her voice that sounded genuine, and I felt my anger toward her soften slightly. "Take care of your baby," I said, "and learn from this. Choices have consequences, even when we do not mean for them to." She nodded and walked back to Marcus, who was standing by the door looking lost and broken. Outside the mediation center, Amanda and I stood in the Arizona sunshine, both of us quiet as we processed what had just happened. "How do you feel?" she asked finally. I thought about the question seriously. 6 weeks ago, I had felt devastated and powerless. Today, I felt vindicated but not vindictive. Justice had been served, but it did not feel like a celebration. "I feel like the system worked," I said. "Federal law protected me even when I did not know I needed protection. My service meant something. My sacrifice was recognized and valued." Amanda smiled and shook my hand. "That is exactly what those laws were designed to do." Over the next 8 weeks, I watched from a distance as Marcus and Sarah's dream house was listed, marketed, and sold. The real estate market was strong, and they received multiple offers above asking price. The sale closed on day 87 of our 90-day deadline. Amanda called me the day the settlement check was deposited into my account. "It is done," she said. "Full repayment of your deployment funds, plus interest, plus legal fees. The federal lien has been released, and the matter is closed." I looked at my bank balance and saw numbers I had not seen since before my deployment. But more than the money, I had something else. I had proof that the system I had served me back. I had learned that federal law recognized the unique sacrifices military families make and provided real protection for those sacrifices. I had discovered that quiet strength and legal rights could triumph over betrayal and theft. Marcus called me a week after the sale closed. "I wanted you to know that Sarah and I are moving to Colorado," he said. "Her family is there, and we need a fresh start." He paused, and I could hear the weight of everything that had happened in his voice. "I also wanted to say that I am sorry. Really sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what I did to you. I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. "I hope Colorado works out for you both. I hope your baby is healthy and happy." There was another long pause before he spoke again. "Do you think you will ever forgive me?" he asked. It was a question I had been asking myself for weeks. "I think forgiveness is something that happens over time," I said. "Right now, I am focused on moving forward, on building a new life with the fresh start your actions forced me to make." It was not the answer he wanted, but it was the truth. Forgiveness might come eventually, but it would be on my terms and in my time. I used part of the settlement money to buy a small house near the base where I was stationed. Nothing fancy, just a clean, simple place that was entirely mine. I furnished it slowly, choosing each piece carefully, building a home that reflected who I was becoming rather than who I had been. The rest of the money went into investments and savings, protected by the same financial advisors who specialized in helping military families plan for the future. I would never again be vulnerable to someone draining my accounts while I was deployed. I had learned to protect myself as well as the federal government had protected me. 6 months after the mediation, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Sarah, postmarked from Colorado. She had given birth to a healthy baby girl and wanted me to know that they had named her Grace. Because, she wrote, we hope she grows up to have the same grace under pressure that you showed during our darkest time. The letter went on to explain that Marcus had found work in Colorado and they were slowly rebuilding their lives. We think about you often, she wrote, and about the lessons we learned from what happened. We're teaching Grace about service and sacrifice and the importance of doing the right thing, even when it is hard. I kept that letter, not because I had forgiven them completely, but because it showed that something good had come from something terrible. A child would grow up learning about honor and consequence because of what her parents had experienced. The ripple effects of justice sometimes traveled further than we could see. A year after my deployment ended, I was promoted to Master Sergeant and assigned to a new position training young soldiers preparing for their first overseas assignments. Part of my job was teaching them about financial protections and legal rights available to military families. I always included a section on deployment pay and federal safeguards. I never told them my personal story, but I made sure they understood that their service came with real legal protections, that there were laws designed specifically to prevent the kind of financial exploitation that had happened to me, that their sacrifice was recognized and valued not just in words, but in federal statutes with real enforcement power. During one of these training sessions, a young private raised her hand. Sergeant, what happens if someone violates these protections? What if family members misuse our deployment money while we are gone? The question hit closer to home than she knew, but I answered professionally. Private, federal law provides serious remedies for misappropriation of military funds, I said. The Service Members Civil Relief Act and other statutes ensure that your financial interests are protected even when you cannot personally oversee them. The system works, but you have to know your rights and be willing to enforce them. After the training session, the same private approached me privately. My sister is getting deployed next month, she said. Her husband has been acting strange about money lately. Do you think I should tell her about these protections? I looked at this young soldier, barely 20 years old, trying to protect her sister from potential betrayal. Private, knowledge is power, I said. Make sure your sister knows her rights. Make sure she has good legal counsel if she needs it. And make sure she knows that serving her country means something, both morally and legally. The private nodded and thanked me, but I was the one who felt grateful. Grateful that my experience could help protect other military families. 2 years after the mediation, I was invited to speak at a conference for military family support organizations. My topic was financial protections for deployed service members. I had never spoken publicly about my personal experience, but I decided it was time to share my story with people who could use it to help others. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of family readiness group leaders, military legal assistance attorneys, and family support coordinators, I felt the same quiet strength that had carried me through deployment and betrayal and legal battles. But now it was directed toward helping others instead of just surviving my own challenges. 3 years ago, I came home from deployment to discover that my spouse had used my deployment savings to purchase a house with another woman. I thought I had lost everything. I thought I had no recourse. I was wrong. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. I told them about the federal protections I had not known existed, about the automatic liens and superior claims and legal remedies that had been working behind the scenes while I felt powerless. I explained how federal law had turned a devastating betrayal into a story of justice and vindication. The laws exist, I concluded, but they only work if people know about them and are willing to use them. Your job, our job, is to make sure military families understand their rights before they need them. Prevention is always better than remedy, but when remedy is needed, make sure they know it is available. The response was overwhelming. Military attorneys approached me with stories of similar cases. Family support coordinators asked for resources to share with their groups. Other service members quietly shared their own experiences with financial betrayal and legal victory. I realized that my story was not unique, but my willingness to talk about it publicly was. That conference led to more speaking opportunities, more chances to educate military families about their legal protections. I began working with organizations that provided financial education to deployed service members. My story became a case study in military law courses. My experience became a teaching tool that could protect others. 5 years after my deployment ended, I received a phone call from Amanda, my attorney. "I have something interesting to tell you," she said. "I just won a case that was almost identical to yours." A deployed Air Force sergeant whose spouse had drained their savings account for a new business with his girlfriend. She went on to explain how she had used the precedent from my case to achieve an even better outcome for her new client. "Federal law is getting stronger," she said. "More attorneys are learning about these protections. More military families are getting the justice they deserve. Your case helped establish that." I hung up the phone and sat quietly in my small house, thinking about the ripple effects of standing up for myself. One legal victory had become a template for others. One person's willingness to fight had made it easier for others to fight. One story of vindication had become a beacon for other military families facing similar betrayals. That evening, I called Jennifer to share Amanda's news. "I am proud of you," my sister said. "Not just for what you accomplished, but for how you accomplished it. You could have been bitter and vindictive, but you chose dignity and justice instead." Her words meant more to me than any legal victory. "I learned something important," I told her. "Revenge is about making someone else pay for hurting you. Justice is about making sure the system works the way it is supposed to work. Revenge would have left me empty. Justice filled me up." As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about Marcus and Sarah and their daughter Grace, growing up in Colorado with parents who had learned hard lessons about consequence and responsibility. I thought about the young soldiers I had trained who now understood their legal protections. I thought about the military families who had been helped by attorneys who learned from my case. The betrayal that had once felt like the end of my world had become the beginning of something larger, something that mattered beyond my personal pain and recovery, something that had turned my worst experience into a source of strength for others facing similar challenges. 6 years later, I married a fellow service member who understood the demands of military life and respected the strength it had built in me. We bought a house together, both our names on the title, both our savings accounts protected by the same federal laws that had once saved me. We built a life based on mutual respect and shared sacrifice. On our wedding day, Mrs. Chun, my elderly neighbor who had welcomed me home from deployment with sympathy and support, was among our guests. During the reception, she pulled me aside and said something I will never forget. "You showed me what quiet strength looks like," she said. "You turned betrayal into justice without losing your dignity. That is a lesson worth remembering." Looking back now, I understand that the story was never really about Marcus and Sarah and their poor choices. It was about learning that service means something, that sacrifice has value, and that the systems we serve sometimes serve us back in ways we never expected. It was about discovering that federal law could be a shield when you needed protection and a sword when you needed justice. Most importantly, it was about learning that vindication does not require revenge, that dignity and legal rights can triumph over betrayal and theft. That quiet strength, backed by federal law and enforced with determination, can turn the worst betrayal into the foundation for something better. Today, when young soldiers ask me about deployment and sacrifice and whether it is all worth it, I tell them about federal protections and legal rights and the importance of knowing their value. But I also tell them something else. I tell them that serving your country means something deeper than paychecks and benefits. It means belonging to a system that recognizes your sacrifice and provides real protection for that sacrifice. They thought they were so clever, using my deployment money to build their dream home together. But when that lawyer read the title deed aloud, when the federal lien notation became clear, when justice was finally served, they learned what I had always known. Service has value. Sacrifice has meaning. And sometimes, the system you serve finds powerful ways to serve you back. That is my story. A story of betrayal and vindication, of federal law and quiet strength, of justice served with dignity intact. It is a story I am proud to tell, not because of how it ended, but because of what it taught me about the true meaning of service and the real power of standing out for what is right.